Hey everyone, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie and it's time for Top 5 Wednesday. And by the way, because I know it's not 4th of July anymore, but for us Americans, I had to go to work yesterday and I work in retail, so we had a uniform and it was not red, white, and blue, it was actually just blue. So I'm wearing my 4th of July shirt today. It's actually my mom's shirt, though. She let me borrow it. Oh, anyway, let me get back to Top 5 Wednesday. So, if you are new to Top 5 Wednesday and interested in doing it, I will post the link to the Goodreads group below. And this is a group that is hosted by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. It was created by Sam and Ginger Reads Laney from Ginger Reads Laney. So, this week's topic is your top 5 future classics, which I think we've done this before. But this was actually one of, I don't know if I could take credit for this one or not, but I remember suggesting it as future topic. But I don't want to assume, of course, that they took, but it was, I remember getting excited when I saw that last year it was a topic in one of the top 5 Wednesdays in one of the months. So I remember being excited because I felt like, oh, that was my idea, but I don't know 100% if it was. It might have been something that they already did, because I, of course, was not gonna, I was a little lazy and didn't look through the list of already used topics. Okay, so I'm first going to tell you the ones that I don't have in my possession, and because I have not figured out how to do things like, sorry, let me move this. Well, you can see my shirt better this way. Since I haven't figured out how to do things like, posting images on the screen, so I'll just talk about those. Okay, so this first one that I think will be a future classic is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I have heard that name so many times, and I still don't know how to pronounce it. What I should have done is, after I watched a video where someone talked about that author, I should have pronounced the name out loud. But I'm bad at pronunciation of foreign names. I feel really bad about that, but Haruki Murakami. But 1Q84 is it's a dystopian book set in Japan. It focuses on 2 characters. Tango and I don't remember the girl's name. It has been a while since I read it, but I remember this book and I remember thinking it would be I could see this being a classic. And these 2 people were they were children together and they knew each other as kids. And as children, like little kids, like elementary school kids, they fell in love in the best way an elementary school child can fall in love. So years later, they're going about their lives, but then for some reason, at some point in their adult lives, something happens where the world changes and becomes this alternate universe, and the differences are very small. They're subtle little changes. It's not anything big. It's not like a world like the Divergent series or the Hunger Games, which, by the way, the Hunger Games is the other one I'm going to talk about in a minute. But it's all little things that are different. And also, there is a cult in this version of 1984 of their world, where it's a cult that it's a very religious. I'm trying to see if I can remember what were the things about this cult. But either way, it's a bad cult, and it hurt, and a lot of women get abused in this cult for some reason. And our female character, which I wish I could remember her name, our female character, she has been recruited by this old woman because, to help these battered, abused women and to take out the man who runs the cult. And then the man who runs the cult, his own daughter escapes and goes to Tango, our male main character, he's a school teacher and he wants to be a writer. So she asked him to edit and ghostwrite the story that she wrote about her life and her experience with the cult. And then of course, eventually over time, Tango and the female character meet again and their lives intersect. For the longest time in the book, their lives are parallel and we go back and forth, but eventually the two of them come together. But this book I think it's a classic because you could really analyze the heck out of this book. There are so many metaphors and so many things in this book that you could study and try to understand and get to the root of the story and the message. And plus, it's inspired by an already existing classic in 1984, hence the title, 1Q84. It is a dystopian. I feel like there are a lot of dystopians we can look at, and it's a weird book. And there's lots of things in the book I remember that the author didn't need to put in there. A lot of weird that could condense the book a little bit more. But I do think it would be a great book to take a class on and to study. The problem is it is a long-ass book. So it's probably more of a book that you would study in college than in high school. Because it's very dense. There are books that I feel, or at least it's a book that I think should be considered a classic. Okay, so the next book that I don't have that I want to talk about is actually a series. Like I said, it's The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This is a book that really, I guess I should explain, but I mean, most people know about this book, but in case you don't, this is a book it's another dystopian. It's in the not too distant future, and the world there was a war, so now everything in that part of the U.S. has been divided into districts where they each specialize in certain things, like mining and, like, practical things. Again, this is another one that it's been a long time since I read it. And the trilogy. Although I've seen the trilogy at the bookstore, and I thought about buying it, but then I'm trying to make room in my bookshelf, so, which I'm also thinking about donating another series that I've been with for a long time. It's a really popular one, and you guys might hate me for it, but it will go to, hopefully, if I do decide to donate it will go to a good home one day. But anyway, I'll tell you guys about that some other time. And in this world, there's these things called the Hunger Games, which every year, a boy and a girl that are between the ages of 12 and 18, I think it's 18, are recruited to participate in these games, and it's a survival game. So there's lots of brutality, killing, and wild animals, and you're actually surviving in the forest, but it's controlled by the capital, which is the government. And we have our main character, Katniss, who her younger sister is only like 14, I believe, if I remember correctly. Her younger sister was the girl that was called to join the Hunger Games, but wanting to protect her sister, Katniss volunteers, this has never happened before, so it is a big deal. She eventually becomes really famous in these games, the capital darling, you could say. And the boy that was called is a boy that actually liked her, that had been a crush on her, Peeta. And so the two of them are forced to participate in the games. And it gets pretty brutal, but eventually, spoiler alert, the two of them survive, but it leads into the next two books, and it becomes this big thing, and it becomes an all-out war against the president of the districts, President Snow. So I think this one would be would be considered a classic, because first of all, it's still popular to this day. It's been like 10, 20 years now, and it's still a big deal in the YA community. Like, I do think that eventually there's going to be a lot more young adult books that are considered classics. Especially since YA now exists because before, up until the 90s, they didn't have books for younger readers. They didn't have teen books that were considered teen books. I mean, there were teen books like J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye. I would say that would be considered YA for today's standards. So there were in S.E. Hinton's, although that one came out in the 90s, I think. S.E. Hinton's, what is it called? I'm having a blank. I'm drawing a blank here. The one about the two gangs and it's like a gang war type of book. I think that would be considered young adult. The Giver could be considered young adult. Wrinkle in Time is more middle grade, I think. But Hunger Games, I think by today, as they continue including more young adult, now that they have young adult books, I think, which, by the way, I was at the bookstore this morning and I saw a book from my childhood that I remember, and it got me really excited that I saw it there. And it wasn't one of those, but the thing is, what got me excited is it's not one of those, it's not one of the popular ones like Harry Potter or something. It was one of those random ones, like Animorphs. It wasn't even as popular as Animorphs, I don't think, but it was called Everworld, and it was a series, kind of similar style to Animorphs. But anyway, I'm getting off topic here, and I wanted to get this done before 12:30, or at least before 1. But it really, Hunger Games provides a commentary on our society and what we find acceptable and what would happen in this situation where survival was the most important thing. I've had this conversation with my dad before, how if we ever got to a point where there was an apocalypse or a disease killed everybody or something like that, what it would come to if it was people, the most important thing was survival, how wild and savage we would become, and how we wouldn't care and we wouldn't have any moral compass anymore. And I feel like that this series, this trilogy, takes a look at that and really studies. And I think, and it's not that long of a series. It's young adult, and young adult does not take that long to read. So I think in high school you could study it. You don't even have to read, because it doesn't end on a cliffhanger, the first book. So you could read just the first book. You could study the first book in a literature class. It's definitely worth looking at, and I think it will become a classic. It's universally popular, and it really looks at at our society and provides a social commentary. Okay, now let's get to the 3 books that I do have. Okay, so the first one that I think will be a future classic is and book number 3 that I think will be a future classic is The Circle by David Eggers. This is another dystopian book. I have quite a few dystopians on here. But to me, this is more like the beginnings of a dystopian, like the beginnings of a possible future. And this is a book about this young woman who's in her 20s, and she's at a crappy job, but she gets the opportunity to get a job at this well-renowned internet company that is basically like Google meets Tumblr meets Twitter meets Facebook, all meets YouTube, all tied into one big thing. It has things like likes, and you could post your pictures on here. Instagram, another, you can find people on here. It's like a big company. And our main character, May, gets a job at this company. And it is a really big deal. And May is a very idealistic, very vain young woman. So she is very flattered to get this job, thanks to her friend, her college friend. But slowly, as May begins to get this job and work here, she begins to realize that this company is a very unique company. Not just in what they do, but their philosophy is there's no privacy, no secrets. Everything should be out there. And they believe, the boss of this company believes that if if you are exposed on camera 24/7, then you won't do anything bad. And at first, on the surface, it seems like, oh, that actually isn't necessarily a bad thing, because, you know, it means that philosophy is ideal, you know. It's, well, I mean, maybe it's true, but you won't be genuine. You won't be your real self. And, like, there's some crazy things, like, May puts a frowny face, which is like and dislike for us on Facebook or on YouTube, on something that's about terrorism, and she also freaks out because she thinks, oh my god, these people, you know, they'll come after me all because I dislike something that they did. So it's very creepy, and it looks at internet and how we are so obsessed with the internet and putting ourselves on the internet, and that's how we interact with most people. And it really asks questions, some really important questions, and really decides, you know, and talks about how you got to put the balance between spending your time on the internet and really being out in the real world and interacting with people for real, and how much privacy do we deserve to have? Do we deserve to have it taken away from us? Because now we're living in this world where almost everything is on the internet. Or, like, and is their philosophy a bad thing? And it really is a book for our generation. You know, so I think I feel like it's a modern day, like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451, with what it looks at and how it goes about things. So, and I definitely think we should study this one in school, because it really relates to today's modern 24th century generation, and I think it's a really important book. So I think this will be a future classic. Next is a book that is probably already considered a classic, because it came out in the 90s, and I would consider books like The Giver a classic because it came out in the 90s. But this is, again, another series. Because there are a lot of series. I mean, I think I know why they don't include series in the classics. Because, you know, you can't go through the whole book. You can't read the whole series in school. You have to read other books in school. So they don't want to, I mean, although there are a lot of books that, of course, this is just the classics that they study in school. So it could still be considered a classic even if you don't study it in school. But there could also be, I know there's, like, in California, in schools and colleges in California, they do have a class where you can study Buffy. But that is the Harry Potter series. And yes, it's the 6th book. I just ended up grabbing the book 6 because I was at the top. I have these books set aside in a box, in a storage kind of box. And that box is not organized, so this is the first book that was on the pile. So I don't think I need to explain what this is about, because every girl and her mom, every boy, every girl and boy knows what this book is about. And I know it's been banned in a lot of places, but it really isn't just about that it's some fantasy adventure about this kid who defeats a bad guy. It's really looks at, good versus evil is a universal topic, and I feel like we don't study it enough in school. I think that's one of the aspects about the one semester I did try to take philosophy. That was one of the things we kind of looked at before I got out of the class. That's one of the things we studied is good versus evil. It's a universal theme. It's a very important theme, and I think we should study it more in literature, because it's in a lot of literature. Whether it's genre fiction or actual literary fiction. I think it's important, but it also looks at prejudice, because they have a lot of they have terms for people that are in wizard families that don't have magic in their bones and have to study it. That are called squibs. You have people that are witches and wizards, but they are born to Muggle families. They're called mudbloods, the slang term for them. And then there's the opposite, and squibs are the opposite of that. So there are a lot of derogatory terms. So it really examines prejudice. And there's also, there's a kid that's a bully in the story, Draco Malfoy, who will bully Harry's best friend Ron because he's poor. So it really looks at bullying and prejudice against people, and I think that's also an important issue we should study in school, or at least it's something worthy of a classic. Like I said, this series I think is kind of considered a classic. It's just not one you study in school. You hear about being studied in schools, and it's not in the classic section of the library or the bookstore. But I feel like it probably already is considered a classic. I feel, and it really looks at growing up and it's a coming of age story as well. And again, I feel like young adult books will become more of the norm when it comes to classics. So this series provides a lot. It looks at a lot of things that I think should be talked about in school and discussed. And I feel like we don't do that enough. Okay, so the last book that I have here, number 5, the 5th book, is Circe by Madeline Miller. This is the only Madeline Miller book I have read. I have not read A Song of Achilles. I keep hoping that I'll find it at the bookstore, at the Gibbons bookstore, but it's never there, so I might end up just wasting my money, spending a lot more money and buying it at Books A Million. But who knows? I might, or I could just save and ask for it for Christmas. I don't know, because there's 6 more months until Christmas, so. Now, this is a book about the character in the Odyssey. So it's a book inspired by an already existing classic, just like 1Q84, about the witch that Odysseus, on his travels, he stays on her island of Aea for a year. And it's her story. Like, in the original, most people, from what I heard, most people see the character of Circe as evil, because, like Odysseus cheats on his wife Penelope with Circe, and he sleeps with her, and she gets pregnant. But I feel like this book takes a look at her and puts a spin on her that shows her in a more positive light, makes her a more sympathetic character, because you're looking at the story through her eyes. You are seeing Odysseus through her eyes. You are seeing the gods through her eyes, the gods and the titans. And it's a book that looks at feminism, because it is about a female character and how hard life is for her. Now she's judged for being half a witch, and how she becomes a stronger character, a stronger woman, a stronger witch, because of her experiences when she's banished from her family, how she's desperate to be loved, and how she realizes that her family will never love her because they're gods. They can't express love the way humans do, and how she is a very human god. Even though she's a goddess, she has a human heart and has compassion for humanity and cares about it and loves it. And like I said, I feel like this book looks at feminism and looks at, really, and again, it expands on a classic. Just like so does Song of Achilles, which is about Achilles and through Patroclus' eyes. I hope I pronounced that right. Patroclus, I can't remember if I pronounced that correct. Through his eyes. So it looks at the war between the Trojans and the Greeks. But this one looks at another part of it, not at the war, but at Odysseus' journey and his time on Aea. But it's also not his story. So we only have a couple chapters when we learn, just like in the Odyssey, we only have a couple chapters with Odysseus, just like we only had a couple chapters with Circe in that book. And I think books that expand on classics and don't just retell them, but really look at another point of view of the classic are very important and worth becoming classics themselves. So I think this will be a future classic. So those are all my future classics. 1Q84, Hunger Games, The Circle by David, the Harry Potter series, and Circe by Madeline Miller. Even if you're not interested in Top 5 Wednesday, what are books that you consider to be classics? You can list 5 or more in the comments below. I would love to know. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and click subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you are currently enjoying your reading, and I will talk to you guys later. Alright, bye!